Now, if you saw, and I would guess you did, that video of that SUV driver and his family being attacked by a mob of motorcyclists last fall, it's pretty hard to forget. Now, the father and driver of that vehicle plans to sue the city and two of the NYPD officers who were among his alleged attackers. He has filed a notice of claim stating that a vicious and unruly mob of motorcycle riders attacked and assaulted him and vandalized his motor vehicle by smashing a rear window where his toddler was sitting. No specific dollar amount was named. A file of claim is a preliminary step towards a formal lawsuit. And Doug, we're hearing numbers like 70 grand or so for each person in the car, and there was 3 people in the car. Two things stuck out to me. One is the amount. I figured it was for a lot more, and they didn't cap it at that. And the second thing is you go directly after the city. I know they have the deepest pockets, but what was the city's responsibility in this?
Well, you know, first off, the amount, that's really just a threshold. It can change, you know, they're not limited by that in any way at trial. But the city, it becomes important because the allegation is that there are police officers involved. And the city is going to be the target because I assume these guys don't have a lot of money. So to get to the city is where the deep pockets are. But if the city knew that these guys are there, and if these guys had an obligation to protect a person who's a member of the public, and they didn't follow through on that obligation, well, then the city could be liable. But factually, it's going to be very important to figure out what happened and what capacity they were there as. Police officers or just guys riding around on a motorcycle.
Where is that line when a cop's off duty? Okay, and the 2 officers here, one was certainly off duty, and the other one, it gets muddy because he said he was in an undercover capacity. And the threshold, if, as I understand, you correct me, if you're an officer in undercover capacity, you're not compelled to step in and intervene, but you have to report it immediately after, and he didn't do that either. Where's that line? On duty, off duty, and the city and the NYPD being culpable?
Well, let's look at an example of a police officer has a domestic dispute at home. And the city's not liable for that, even though technically police officers are on duty 24 hours. If, on the other hand, he's working in an undercover capacity, then he does connect the city to this event. But the other issue for city liability, though, as I was thinking about it, is my understanding is that these guys did the same thing earlier somewhere on Broadway or in the city, and the city does have a responsibility to control its streets. So here they do it on Broadway, and then they start moving up to the West Side Highway.
I was thinking about that. Where's the line? Who decides what the line is between not doing a great job and being negligent?
Well, first the judge is going to decide on a motion, as to whether or not the plaintiff has pled, and this is your neck of the woods, but whether a plaintiff has pled enough of a case to get it to a jury, and then ultimately a jury will decide. But, in this case, that might be an issue of law, but the issue of whether or not these officers were on duty, were not on duty, whether they had an obligation as police officers to intervene, I'm not so sure that they don't have an obligation at some point if somebody's life is in danger and they're in an undercover capacity to intervene.
Yeah, the other thing is, as I recall, the problem with one of the officers is that he basically lied by saying that he was not there at the time that this took place. He came upon the scene later. The video shows he was there. More importantly, as I recall it, the video also shows that he seemed to be actively engaged in the attack on the car.
I'm sure those guys were really happy the guy had a video camera in his helmet for this.
So I mean, I think that depending upon the gravity of the situation, even if he's acting in an undercover capacity, if in order to protect life or property, I think sometimes he would be obligated to.
How about, to me, it's tricky, if not even trickier than this. One of the motorcyclists, and we have the video if they can, when they tried to stop short in front of the vehicle, at least that's the interpretation I and most people had, the driver gets panicked. And I think a lot of people can appreciate if you had your loved one and your child in the car and you're surrounded by 30 guys on motorcycles banging into your car, you're going to hit the gas. He ran over him and unfortunately paralyzed one of them. If the guy was engaging in arguably criminal or whatever behavior, we just saw it right there, should that person, the victim, be able to collect even if he was acting recklessly and that was what precipitated the...
Well, there's precedent. I think in one instance, a police officer some years ago shot someone fleeing from the scene, and that person wound up successfully suing the city of New York. He also was paralyzed and recovered a substantial sum of money. Every case is fact specific. There are no hard and fast rules. certainly what you're suggesting is very possible. In other words, that motorcyclist could turn around and sue the driver of the car because he basically ran him over.
Yeah.
There would be a defense to it, and how a jury would look at it, that's the unanswered question.
And finally, in these kind of things, Doug, do concurrent cases tie into each other? Does one attorney wait to see if your victim's the guy who's paralyzed? Do you wait to see what is going on with the other case for the guy suing the city, so you have an idea who's got what to go after?
A lot of times the criminal prosecutions will go in front of the civil, and then you'll see what people get convicted of, and then obviously the civil can follow from there. But yeah, of course, I mean, you have to see this factually. If you look at that video, I mean, there's a million different fact patterns going on, and you have to figure that out. Listen, pretend like you're on a jury and you're looking at that video. What would the reasonable man do if he was in the same position? Right. Would he hit the gas? I mean, there's very fact specific.
Interesting. Now, we come back. We all watch, for those of us who are not barristers like yourselves, we all see the shows here. We see attorneys racked by guilt after certain cases. And I'm going to ask, true to life, are there ever cases where you guys know your client didn't do what he was accused and justice didn't get it right at the end of the day? We'll be right back with that after this.